shift in the curriculum. So the first question then is, why shift? And in brief, I just want to say the time has come to shift. Sometimes when you shift, it is not because there is something fundamentally wrong with what you have been doing, but time has come to change. And in brief, I want to invite us to appreciate that if you look at the development of the world globally, if you look at the global development, arguably we have had 4 main revolutions. There are people who say we have had the agrarian revolution, we have had the industrial revolution, we have also had what some people call the earlier form of communication revolution. Today, the 21st century has brought to us the technological revolution, which has changed a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Learning at school not left behind. And so that is, if you want to define the 21st century, that is the key definition of what has happened, the change in technology. In realization of that change, globally, colleagues, the world has reformed all its education curricula. In fact, a lot of countries started these reforms in the 1960s in anticipation of the year 2000 and what it will portend. In Kenya, 21 years into the 21st century, we are still discussing whether we should reform or not. So the world has moved on. And I dare invite us to Google. The default curriculum in the whole world now is the competency-based curriculum. I ask colleagues in many fora that I have, show me any country that you know of that is not offering the competency-based curriculum today. And the competency-based curriculum is defined by certain key competencies. And therefore, if you Google 21st century competencies, again you will find the 7 competencies that we have captured in Kenya to be able to guide us. And these managers and administrators of schools need to know the easiest way of remembering the competencies in the CBC is to think about 4 C's and 3, where the first C is communication and collaboration, the second C is critical thinking and innovation, the third C is citizenship, then we also have creativity and imagination. Add to that the most fundamental reason we are reforming the curriculum, which is digital literacy. The children who come to your schools, even at pre-primary school level, are already more or less digital natives, but we need to have a curriculum that will help them to enhance their competence in the digital space so that they can be global citizens. Then on top of digital literacy, add a critical competence in the world today, learning to learn. Recognizing that we will always be confronted by situations that call for knowledge, values, and skills, it is important to imbibe in our children the ability to continue learning. And the last one, self-efficacy. And I think here, from our own research at Kicd, we are pleasant to note that our learners who are in your schools have a serious, commendable sense of self-efficacy. But thinking about the paradigm shift, then the next question is, what are we shifting from? We are shifting from, I'll say for the lack of so much time, 5 things. 1, we are shifting from a rigid curriculum where learners are confined to certain learning areas and told, if you don't do well in these learning areas, you will not progress. And you know them. If you look at the KCSE today, we have 5 learning areas that learners must pass if they have to do any reasonable program at the university. They have to pass English, Kiswahili, mathematics, and 2 sciences. And if you don't get a C+ in any of these areas, it doesn't matter that you have your A in home science, that you have your A in fine art, you have your A in religion, you have your A in music, you will not get even a chance to proceed to that university and do that in which you have got your A. And because of that, we have data at the Ministry of Education that shows a big percentage of learners that we have lost, not because they don't have the intellectual ability, but because we did not give them a chance to pursue that which they have demonstrated potential in. So we are changing because of rigidity. The second thing for which, the reason for which we are changing is values. We have seen it that we have produced people, some of whom are very clever, and some of them are top leaders today. But somehow you look at the way they express themselves, they conduct themselves, and you feel that there's a lack of values. Private schools, you have done very well here. I'm your parent in some school I'm not going to mention. And I appreciate the kind of values. Actually, I've been your parent for all my children. I'm not going to say how many they are. Where I come from, men don't count their children. Because there are some who are official, and then you cannot account for those who are not official. But where they have all gone to your schools. And that which exists in them, which keeps them going, are the values that they have got from you. The third reason we are reforming the curriculum, colleagues, is we need a curriculum that we can identify technically and which globally can be appreciated. We have a lot of people who are highly educated in this room. If I ask us, the curriculum we are facing out now, what curriculum is it? What is the curriculum we are facing out now? Thank you. You are below expectations. 844 is a structure. It says learners shall be in primary school for 8 years, 4 years in secondary, 4 years at university. What is that curriculum that is housed in that structure called? The fact that you are struggling to give it a name means that we have a problem. And you could stretch that question. Somebody is saying knowledge-based. Yes, you could call it a bit of it knowledge-based, a bit of it skills-based. You could also talk a bit of it examination-based. So it is madoa-doa. It's a very well-decorated cloth. But I could stretch you further. Those of you who are in the 5th floor, like me and older, the curriculum before 844, what was its name?
7.
Thank you. Somebody is saying 7, 4. You are giving me a structure again. What? CPE. That is a Certificate of Primary Education. As a name of the curriculum. So you did 7 years of primary school, then you did 4 years of secondary, 2 years of A levels, then you went to university. But we have not sat down as a country to decide what is the name of this curriculum. I was introduced as professor, as a teacher, as a scholar in education, I know that a curriculum basically means all those experiences, formal, informal, that you will expose learners to enable them to acquire knowledge, values, and skills. And those curricula all over the world have names. And that is the problem, colleagues, that at independence, before independence, we had a curriculum called African Traditional Education. If you read the books of Mbiti, they will articulate that a lot. In that curriculum, just give me a minute to explain, it was mainly experienced through apprenticeship. People learned from people who are ahead of them. But the main hallmark of that curriculum, if you want to recall, is that it was competency-based. At the end of the day, everybody in your village, if you recall, had some activity by which they were recognized. So if you went to my village, where I come from, somewhere in Homa Bay County, and you were looking for Ochieng, my father is called Ong'Ondo, but my name is Ochieng. People will ask you, you are looking for Ochieng. Ochieng who does what? There's Ochieng who thatches roofs. There's Ochieng who is known for being a livestock keeper. There's Ochieng who is known for beating drums. There's Ochieng who is known for treating people. Everybody was known for something that they did. And I think that society really looked down upon people who are not able to do something. And some songs were composed around them. People who are lazy and could not be identified in their activity. And some people say this kind of people are good at moving from place to place as a way of disguising the fact that they are very busy, but busy doing nothing. Where I come from, one of the words that they are called is Jamriambo, you know, the liar. Yes. They move from home to home. So occasionally you hear musicians saying, Jamriambo, they walk from home to home making people fight because there is nothing with which they are identified with. And if you kept cows, and you had a cow which was troublesome, always wandering from one farm to another, you gave them the name Jamriambo, because you had to identify that people do nothing. African traditional education. Fast forward, the missionaries and the British gave us an education system that we almost copied and pasted. We did 7 years of primary school, 4 years of secondary, 2 years, and this. But that curriculum, if you recall, was mainly intended to give us personnel who would replace the British and Indians who had been occupying what have since been called white-collar jobs. The main identity of those jobs was clerk. Wanochome, if you had a relative who was working in Nairobi as a clerk, that was supposed to be a very important person. So it didn't matter what somebody was doing in Nairobi. If they were a watchman during the holidays or they get a good break, they come home in some suit, doesn't matter that they have borrowed it, and then they have a record player, they come to the village. Then your auntie can now say, the man I'm giving you is a clerk. So the idea was that this curriculum was mainly thought about, education was mainly considered with that, which will give you a skill to do a job where you are a clean person, you are a clean man, you are a clean woman. And if for some reason you ended up doing things that people do using hands, then you are thought about not to have gone to school very much. And so sometimes when people are being invited from one and you didn't get there, people are saying, I've not got a chance in secondary school, I've only got a chance in technical education. So that's why from independence there were a lot of commissions. Starting with the Ominde Commission of 1964, we had Gachafi in 1976, we had Kamunga in 1988, we had Koeti in 1999. The one that finally changed our curriculum was McKay. McKay, as you know, was the chairman of the Presidential Working Party on the formation of the second public university in Kenya. In the process, they ended up suggesting that we remove A-levels because it was hindering many people from going to university. Those of you who remember KACE, sometimes called Kamodo Advanced Certificate of Elimination. You remember that one? So not many people were going to university. And because of that, they removed A-levels, but did simple mathematics. Add 1 year onto secondary, add 1 year onto primary. So where we had 7, now we have 8. So we have 8, and then add 1 year onto university, where the typical period was 3 years, so that we have 8, then 4, and 4. If you read the McKay Commission report, especially on the forward, so you don't have to read so much, they say that their mandate was to review the formation of a public university in Kenya, and the review of the educational curriculum was just a consequence, and it had not been thoroughly thought about. In fact, they say that class 7 and class 8 should have been conceptualized more as vocational schools. Today, ladies and gentlemen, in 2021, do you know that we are one of just about 3 countries in the whole world that is keeping children in primary school for 8 years? Google, tell me if you know any other country. I know only 3 which keeps children in school for 8 years. So one of the reasons, therefore, we are changing the curriculum is to be able to align our curriculum to what takes place globally, which has been proved, tried and tested. And what takes place globally is, at pre-primary school, the reason learners go to school is one. If you want to capture it in one word, say interaction. Say interaction. Again. Again. That is how I was taught at pre-primary school level. And sometimes when you went home and you were asked, what did you learn at school? You said, we learned again, again, again. Because these children have lived with us in our homes, and some of you run schools where they are, the only people they know is the mother, maybe the father, maybe the caretaker. They have not learned to interact, and anybody else who tries to carry them, they cry. So give them these 2 years, so that then they can start to realize that there are other spaces around them, learn to play with others, learn to collaborate, learn to communicate, learn to create at that level, learn to be able to express themselves. Then primary school level, which is grade 1 to 6 now, and that coincides with the age 6 to age 12, is supposed to give children only one word: socialization. Say socialization. Yes. And that socialization is achieved mainly through 3 main learning areas: through literacy, through numeracy, and through social skills. In the institute, we have broken down, especially the literacy, which gives us now English, gives us Kiswahili. The numeracy, where we are basically saying mathematics activities. Then the social skills, that's where we have science and technology. That's where we have social studies. That's where we have music and other activities. But anyway, if you are to package it in one thing, then it is just social skills. That is what a learner is supposed to do. Colleagues, if you look at Standard 7 and Standard 8 curriculum today, we did it after McKay had recommended it was adopted. Many of us in this room cannot pass the Class 8 exam, even in an area where you claim expertise. And the question therefore is, if I brought the Class 8 exam now, and I say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, hands down, keep away your bags, keep away your books. In the next 5 minutes, we are going to say start. How many of you would be courageous enough to remain in that room? Psychologically, if a child reaches age 12, you know what happens. From age 12 now, they're going to be called a teenager, right? That child's mind has transformed. They no longer want to see themselves sharing space with another one over age 6. Traditionally, at that time, they have been initiated. That child needs a different experience. And that's why before we started the 100% transition to secondary, the highest dropout rate was at Class 6. That's where we are losing most of our learners. They want a different experience. That different experience in many parts of the world now is now packaged in junior secondary school, where the one word that defines the experience we want learners to have there is exploration. Say exploration. Yes. Again, very good. You are very good learners. You are approaching expectations. So at junior secondary, consistent with the psychology of those children, and here, any of you who wants to Google Jean Piaget cognitive development theory, you will find that that age is a wild age. The learner wants to experiment with everything. And that's why we have given them a very broad spectrum curriculum of 12 learning areas, so that they can try their hand into those which could be called social sciences, those which could be called technology, those which could be called pure sciences, as the teacher helps to identify their potential. Ladies and gentlemen, that must be the most important point I want to make to you, because I'm heading towards finishing. That most of you may have been operating primary schools, but even those of us who have been operating or running secondary schools, we have been doing it as one package, from 1 to Form 4. The main definition of the junior secondary you are going into now is that we are supposed to provide learners with an opportunity to explore, to discover where they intend to go. So you will find that one term, learners are showing a lot of potential in the pure sciences. The next time you're wondering what has happened to this child, that now they suddenly are doing very well in CRE or any other religion, in history and citizenship, in another learning area like even foreign language. That is the characteristic of the learner at that level. So don't condemn them. That inconsistency in their performance is consistent with that age. Even at home, when you have an age 12 up to age 15, and you ask them what they want to do, one day they are very sure that they want to go and join the military. And they will even stand up and march, the way the military people march. The next day they want to be a musician. And they will sing, and you say, my son, I think you have been called. The third day, all they want to do is to be a mechanic. They feel suddenly they want to be an engineer or something. That is okay with the children at that age. And even in terms of behavior, one day they are sleeping the whole day. The other day they are playing the whole day. That inconsistency in terms of their character is why we feel that learner needs that broad spectrum curriculum before we give them senior secondary, simply one word, pre-career studies. Say pre-career studies. Yeah, because at the end of the day, the country is looking for people who will join the world of work. But you have to give learners a forum to be able to think about, okay, I have experimented. Now I want a chance to read a bit more, to develop more of my skills, to have the relevant values that are consistent with STEM, with the arts, or with sports and the performing arts. So that's why, that's the rationale behind senior secondary. And colleagues, countries that have done very well in terms of development, industrial development, research shows, because that's what we wake up and do. I told you that we do our curricula based on stakeholder engagement and benchmarking. Countries that we look up to have followed that kind of path. They have had a junior secondary. And if you look at a study done by the World Bank far back in 1998 on the problem with secondary education in the sub-Saharan Africa, the book is called Secondary Education at the Crossroads. What they said in their result after doing a lot of research across Africa is that Africa is not giving learners an opportunity to explore, to nurture every learner's potential. We are getting our learners to specialize very quickly. And what I want to say at that point, colleagues, yes, that change is going to come with a bit of disturbance. There is no change that comes easily, but change rewards. Chairman, Mr. Chome, I think you probably come from roughly a similar background as I come from. In Luoland, if you're leaving your father's home and you want to go and establish your home, traditionally, you go in one day. Your parents wake up one day and tell you, my friend, you are enough, take your wife and children, go and establish your home. You don't come back to sleep where you are sleeping all alone. That comes with total discomfort. But the pride that comes with it, that now don't joke, but I am in my own compound. Even when your father comes, he says, hey, who is it? This home, that you have your own gate is important. Colleagues, where we sit as a curriculum developer, I will look at you straight in the eye and say, in the spirit of what the lady who spoke before me said, this is the best thing happening in our lifetime to our children. And if we don't do it now, our children, whether we shall be dead or not, will blame us for not having had the foresight to say, where are we going? How do we repackage our curriculum to get there? Think 20 years into the future. Just about 20 years ago, these phones you are using to record me were not there. Now, think about what they will have 20 years from now. And think about whether the curriculum we have now is likely to take us there. Recently, I attended a UNESCO conference where the main focus was reimagining our future. So, at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, our duty is to imagine the future. And Kenya has Vision 2030, Africa has African Agenda 2063. The whole world has 21st century MDGs. And think about how do we get there? Colleagues, we are not going to get there without digital literacy. And that's why, even as we complain that the curriculum is causing a bit of inequity, if we don't put digital literacy there, the country will not commit resources that will make our learners have digital literacy. Colleagues, I could have said more and more about why we are reforming the curriculum, but that's where we are. Just for information's sake, when children therefore leave senior school, where we have said it is pre-career, to bachelor's, then now it's a training in a profession, it's a professional training. When they go to master's, it's training in research, and when they go to PhD now, it's discovery. So these people who walk around only telling you they are Dr. So-and-so, Professor so-and-so, ask them what they have discovered. So, CBC, my last point in 1 minute. What do we expect of KPSA? What do we expect of private schools in the CPC dispensation? Ladies and gentlemen, the competency-based curriculum simply focuses on outcomes that can be demonstrated for every level of education, pre-primary, primary, junior, secondary, and so on. For each of those learning areas, our interest is how can the learner demonstrate a competency? Can they do, not do they know? There are many people who can sit down and tell you so much about soccer. A lot of the men here, when you want an excuse to get out of the house, you say, today we have a very serious match. Man City is playing Liverpool. You sit down on a high stool, Kenyans call it Sinatabu, and you can name the entire squad of both teams, and when they don't score, you blame them. But if they give you a ball, you don't know where to take it. So you are only competent in talking about. There is knowledge about, but there's also knowledge how. CBC is about knowledge how. Can learners do? That concept of knowledge how is anchored in the philosophy that is called pragmatism. Say pragmatism. You have seen some people on television calling themselves education experts. One of the things they say is that CBC is not anchored in any philosophy. Colleagues, I'm Doctor of Philosophy, and I know, without boring you into that dry world, philosophically we have realism, we have relativism, we have pragmatism. CBC is anchored in pragmatism. Say pragmatism. That has 5 tenets that I want you to think about as you settle on junior secondary. The first one, learning should be interesting. Create an environment that will stimulate sufficient interest in our learners. And many of you have run away with this. That's why children actually are running from some public schools to go to private schools, because of sufficient interest. I call it the emotional state of your school. When I walk into your school, what can I see that interests learners in learning? That learners feel they want to wake up. You know, during COVID, we did not know what to do with our children. Because for some of your schools, the children were so mad that they are not going to school. I just want to go to school. I just want to call my teacher. And they know the names of those teachers. They identify with very simple things, but which are very important. Some of them will simply identify by your anthem. If you are here and you are running a school and your school doesn't have an anthem, just realize that it's one of the things that potentially attracts things to you. Interest. The next thing about CBC, which we need to think about as going to junior secondary, consistent pragmatism, is experience. CBC is about learners experiencing their own learning. Tell your teachers that they are a guide by the side, not a sage on stage anymore. Some of you charge reasonably high fees. Remind your teachers they are not the people who have paid the fees. The fellow who has paid the fees to learn is the learner. So if you are walking around your school looking like you are looking for a broken fence, and you hear a teacher talking for 5 minutes before learners respond, call them later and say there was no learning which took place. Talk for 1 minute, let the learners do, and that is possible. The third issue around CBC anchored in pragmatism is practicality. Making learning practical, and that's why, colleagues, some of you have excelled in getting their teachers to use locally available materials to be able to facilitate learning. I trained as a teacher of language. I should have mentioned I went to River Teachers College and taught for 8 years before I went to university. And at that point, we were all trained as teachers to be able to improvise, to be able to institute what we call participatory learning practices. So I believe Dr. Naburi told you that even as we say we are training teachers now, the idea is just reinducting teachers to appreciate that we need to run away from drilling learners to pass an exam to facilitating them to acquire competencies. And there's nothing wrong if one learner is approaching expectations in one area and is exceeding expectations in another area. That is what learning is. Even when I was in school, I was literally struggling to catch up with mathematics, but had my distinction in language, which is what I profess today. So, practicality. And practicality means, colleagues, this is where we will be called upon to invest in a bit of infrastructure. So that learners have an opportunity, especially at junior secondary, to do things practically. If you want to teach learners speaking, give them opportunities to speak. If you want learners to make something, to make this bottle, give them an opportunity to be able to manipulate. So this is where we are requesting you, and I believe my bosses talked about it yesterday, to invest in basic equipment, basic infrastructure that will promote practicality. The next issue in pragmatism, I have mentioned 3, correct, or 4? 3. The next one is utility. Utility. Always keep checking. Have I given learners an opportunity to demonstrate that what they have learned has a value, has a utility value to the society in which they live today? We are not waiting to establish that utility through some kind of formative examination. And so when I come to your school, there are a lot of activities you can see children are doing that demonstrate that this education, even if they stop learning today, is of value to the community. And that's one of the reasons, one of the things that you will be able to do there is, remember, in this curriculum, we need to apply value-based education, connect it to all our learning experiences. That is critical. Community service learning, children need to think about how do I apply this in the community, need to think about pertinent and contemporary issues. And a lot of you people have programs which promote this practicality, demonstrating early on. And this is where parental engagement and empowerment comes in. And I personally really celebrate the assignments you give children to take home. As I talk to you, I'm one of those parents, like somebody mentioned, who has to go home early now because somebody is going to come with an assignment. By the way, I have a CBC child. Don't worry that I'm one. I am not going to work so hard for this curriculum, but I don't benefit directly. I'm not talking about a grandchild, I'm talking about... So when this fellow comes home, like yesterday from nowhere, and says, can we draw our family tree? And she says, okay, let's start from your grandfather. Now I have to start from Ong'Ondo, the son of Othim. So Othim had how many sons? Can you draw them? You know, she didn't see them, they are all there, but she wants to see how they could have looked. And the kid, a grade 2 child is telling me, was one of them fat or thin? Can we draw that? The next time the fellow is telling me, okay, now let us go out in darkness and see how long our shadows will be. Then I'm wondering now, how long will our shadows be? I said, come on, Dad, pick a torch. I don't have a torch, but your phone has light. Let us go out and check it. Children are educating us interesting things. The next day they say, this chicken that we are eating, can we have a live one and see how it is dismembered? So that now we have the chicken thigh and we have this. Children are teaching parents wonders. Basic knowledge that we need, which don't cost so much, and getting us to be engaged. You know, sometimes I tell parents, do you know the name of your child's class teacher? A number of people don't know, and they are waiting at the end of the day to come and hit at the teacher. Why are you asking for this? Of course we are pleading, let us not exaggerate. If you are in a context where there is printing, downloading, and clicking pictures, you encourage more of learning resources, but practicality becomes important. The last thing I want to mention about pragmatism is assessment. Pragmatism and CBC, as you know, and my colleague Dr. Nyegere sent apologies, we were in the assignment together yesterday. That's why, colleagues, we are emphasizing formative assessment. In CBC, every lesson is an assessment, because assessment now is not assessment of learning, it is assessment for learning, and therefore assessment as learning, where children can also assess themselves, where we don't have colleagues to wait at the end of the year and call prayers to pray for children. And if you have a bad preacher on that day, the prayer itself will scare children out of that exam. Say, God, the way you delivered somebody from the lion of Eden, deliver your children from the den of these exams. Break the bondage of all the devils that are going to go on the children's pens and books. Praise God. Poor children. The tone that has been set by the preacher alone is threatening. And then, of course, the children are even dreading, who are me? If I go home and I have not passed, nobody will carry me shoulder high, the way we are carrying others. So that is one of the reasons the curriculum has to change. As we carry that one child in the whole of your family shoulder high, the rest of them are average like me. By the way, I told you I didn't go straight to university. I first went to a diploma college. So I'm not a very clever person, but I'm a very hard worker. Many of you are like that. You are just a little above average. So I can imagine how many of you are carried shoulder high. I was never carried shoulder high. Have you thought about those other children that we are not carrying? What are we telling them? So we want to give every child an opportunity to demonstrate that I may not be very good at English language, but Dad, you can see I have my A in my fine art, and I can make a living out of this. Ladies and gentlemen, KICD is a public institution. You are all welcome to engage with us. I want to say, if you need training on CBC beyond that which has been offered by government, feel free to get directly in touch with us. We shall induct you. We will not be doing it for profit. If, for example, you are in Nairobi, we will not even charge you anything because we can drive there and go back to KICD. If you are in a place outside the city, then we can always talk about it because we are a public institution. We have a lot of facilities that you may not be aware of in what we call our educational media. We have a lot of learning areas, lessons ready-made, already packed into platforms that you can consume them. Pay us a visit, bring your staff there, and let us partner in making sure that this works. I want, as I talk to you, acknowledge the role of the private sector in making us actualize the curriculum. As you know, the government has privatized publishing, and I know some of you are publishers. The people who have made CBC work are publishers. Why? Because, as I talk to you now, they have been able to publish books, even for grade 7, are ready. We are taking them through the processes so that you can be there. But I want to plead with us, please pay attention. As private schools, the chairman, you need to take note of this. Pay attention to government circulars. Just the same way, I know traditionally we send them to public schools through camp directors of education and so on. Please pay attention to them, because like as I talk to you now, some of you, I know with evidence, are not aware that the curriculum designs for grade 1, 2, 3 for English, Kiswahili and indigenous language have been reviewed, and even new books published and distributed only from KLB for now. We'll be reviewing the rest. And so this is information. Always consult. On our website you'll find all our numbers on which one has been approved, what is running. People come to you with what I call a plethora of curriculum designs and support materials, just to tell them, wait a minute, I can confirm from the director whether this is real. And just write a quick email to info@kicd.ac.ke, info@kicd.ac.ke, or ceo@kicd.ac.ke. I respond to mails that I receive at KICD. Some of you have written to us can confirm that. Si Mungu awabariki sana. Mpaka mshangae.